Okay, we can check.
Hey, Nikil, how are you?
Doing well. Can you hear me? Okay,
I
good.
can
I
hear
did
you
choose the right
loud
mic.
and clear.
Cool. Yeah, I have two mics and I wasn't sure. I mean, one of them is not plugged into anything, so I wasn't sure if I chose the right one.
Well, yeah, you're super clear that you're in your podcast studio, aren't you?
Yeah, this is where we shoot most of our tutorials now.
Well, that's awesome. Well, for the audience, I actually heard about Nikil on Twitter in some thread you and I got on,
Yeah.
and I said, "What is this guy doing?" I don't forget where I saw it, but you won the President's Innovation Prize in 2020, and I was like, and then I looked at your website and I thought, "Wow, this is really cool what you're doing for kids out there." And I sent you a message, and here we are. So thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So for the audience, can you tell them what you're doing here with Invent XYZ? I studied it, and I know you're doing these really cool things in schools to, I guess the best way is to say accelerate STEM education, but it's a lot more than that. And you've got a lot of exciting people involved. And my main interest is I just think that our educational system in general isn't doing a very good job at turning out students who are prepared to work in the fields that where they're actually going to get them jobs. I don't want to scare anybody that AI is going to take over, but AI is going to well, not just AI, technology in general at the speed at which we are going is going to change, and you're still going to probably need some jobs out there that are technical jobs that could be electrician or a plumber or these other things that may, at least initially here, take manual things, but it's going to be technical workers who know how to use these systems and these types of programs that we're building that are going to be the future. So with that, tell us a little bit about what you're doing there
Yeah,
with
you did a good
InventXYZ.
job explaining sort of the why. Um, I'll go at it from a slightly different angle, but like it'll arrive in a similar place, which is uh, I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine from college yesterday, and I was like, "Whoa, how have we not had this conversation before?" So the main concept is when you as a like think back to when you were in school, right? As kids go in and come out of school, the vast majority of kids leave school without the skills to do anything interesting, to build or create something that is valuable. That's a travesty, right? Like, because the ability and skill to create useful products, be it tech or otherwise, creates agency. It creates a sense of self empowerment and that like self efficacy. And it's really important in today's world where all of us are staring at phones, at computers. There are cloud systems running farms with GPS controlled tractors, with like film production, which we will probably talk about in a little bit, using these like virtual film production techniques. Um, Literally every single industry is being fundamentally revolutionized by AI, STEM, uh, Internet of Things, electronics, AR and VR, and a ton more related categories. So let's make sure that kids actually know how to do things that are useful to the community, build and create things that are valuable, and take control of their futures, right? Because there are jobs that pay 70 all the way up to 350K that are like somewhat starting or like first couple of years, right? Like the prompt engineers, like have you seen some of the job postings for AI prompt engineers that pay 350K? Like,
I didn't see that 350K. I actually gave a keynote speaker talk at the Direct Sellers Association. I
yeah,
basically said that AI isn't going to kill jobs or isn't going to replace your job, but if you don't know how to use AI, you will be replaced.
exactly. You'll be replaced by somebody who knows how to use
Yeah.
AI.
So
And
they're
so
going
there's
for,
like,
just to interrupt you, but they're going for $350,000 for a person who just knows how to prompt a AI engine, whether I know
yeah,
ChatGPT is the
some,
popular
right.
one, but knows how to correctly prompt it to get the output to basically program some automation for that company.
This is the thing. Now, whether or not a company actually hires at that amount is a different question, but that is the job posting
Wow,
on a few different sites. It
that's
was
incredible.
going doing the rounds on Twitter a while back, but I mean that's the reality, right? Like there are jobs that create valuable things for real people, um, that students today would be able to take, and like school districts have and like teachers have for the past few years been talking about preparing kids for the jobs that don't exist yet. And then they end up eventually saying, I don't know what the technical skills are, so let's just teach them soft skills, but like devoid of any context. Well, those jobs are here now. So let's make sure we have the right context. Make sure kids know how to do things like recreate historical empires as video games, to learn history, or things like use AI to analyze their sports form and understand the physics of what makes a throwing motion more accurate or more powerful. And really see the technology applications everywhere.
Yeah. So what made you, can you rewind a little bit?
Yeah.
I agree with everything. And we're going to talk about sort of how this unfolds and how it all works. And I agree with you 100%. It's why I actually, and I don't know if you know this or follow my Twitter threads, but I used to teach a course on how to build a business plan, 11 slides, mainly because I had done it and made so many mistakes and sort of got tired of repeating myself and created this little
Yeah.
course. And I actually started, I wanted to teach it and I give it away for free. So I'm not selling courses here. And I recently started, and it's why I really got interested in you. And I think I might have mentioned this is
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
high school kids is like, we used to say, oh my God, we got to teach this in college, right? Or we've got to teach this at a master's level, or we got to teach this at a PhD, sort of different, but we got to teach this in this post education, graduate school. I actually think that's too late because now the kids are saying, well, do I even take on the debt in some cases to go to college? And what is that college actually going to give me? And I see high school kids, even locally here in Half Moon Bay, California, coming out of the
Mm-hmm.
public school system who want to start businesses, but they're not even getting like, they're not even getting the like you said, sort of the fundamentals of even asking the right questions to know how to
Yeah.
get to the thing that they're getting to. So it's fundamentally important. So with that though, can you rewind and talk about like, why are you passionate? Do you have kids? Do you have a nephew, a niece? Like what made
Yeah.
you do this?
No, I was the kid. So
Okay.
this whole like kind of concept came about from a variety of experiences I had in middle school and high school. And in fact, my college essays, I wrote about starting a company that creates inventions to improve quality of life and make life simpler, and create a network of inventor spaces in every high school across America so every kid can do the same. But just having spaces isn't enough, right? Like you need to actually have the right kind of projects and mentorship and guidance to actually be able to use the stuff. So, like, I'll tell you a couple of examples from like personal stories. So, in middle school, I was a percussionist in the like school band. So I played like xylophone and marimba. And one of the techniques you learn is how to play chords on like imagine like a giant piano, right? Basically, so you have to hit them with sticks. And the problem is that you have two hands. So how do you play chords which require more than two notes? And so the solution that somebody came up with in the 60s basically is to like stick an extra stick over in your pinky and like do some hand gymnastics. But the problem is that thing causes tendonitis. And so like that's like what 100,000 kids who are percussionists in America are learning every year, right? So it's kind of crazy. So I was learning this thing in the middle of the band hall. I exclaimed, "This is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Why is there not just one shaft with two heads on it?" And my band director came out of the office and was like, "You know what? That's actually kind of a cool idea. You should go build it." And I had barely touched like a screwdriver before at that point in seventh grade. So I was like, "How? Where?" Eventually, like there was no like maker space or innovation space in my middle school. So eventually my mom took me to this like industrial parts warehouse in some sketchy part of Houston, which is like where I grew up. And the manager there said, "Hey, I don't have the part you're looking for, but if you've got a 3D design file, I can 3D print the part for you." And I just looked at him blankly, like, first of all, aren't 3D printers like $100,000, right? When I was in seventh and eighth grade, that was the going price. So why do you trust me to touch that? And secondly, what makes you think I have a 3D design file? Like, but it's
Right.
not an unrealistic expectation. And later in thanks to my like neighbor who had this really nice workshop in his backyard and a lot of his mentorship and some other folks who had mentored me as well, I was able to make a functional prototype and get this thing patented. And that really kickstarted my invention gene and my desire for some like really clear tutorials, a really awesome space where I could build this kind of stuff. And then if you've ever seen like Big Hero 6, there's this scene where the like older brother takes the main character to his like nerd lab, and the kid is all dismissive at first. And then they go in, and it's this like awesome panacea of like some people working on robots. There's one person who's working on some like chemistry to make like pink smoke. And like, it's this like super cool place. And that's what I want school to be like. So I saw school districts investing in maker spaces and innovation labs and spending like $2 million on these fancy facilities, and private schools, of course, too. I visited a bunch, interviewed a bunch across 9 different states, and realized that they'd spent all this money. And over again, I'd see like they don't really know how to use the stuff, or the person who helped set it up would leave, and nobody else in the school had any institutional knowledge. So that was the thing that got me started. And then more recently, there have been laws in a bunch of states across the US that require every single student to learn computer science before graduating from school. So that's awesome, but where are the teachers? And what about like urban schools or rural schools where it's often really hard to recruit qualified teachers in the first place, much less computer science teachers? So that's kind of the like in that we're targeting as a way to kind of solve that immediate problem and then really expand the vision of what students are capable of in school.
What states have passed those laws? I haven't heard that. Not that
Yeah,
I mean, I just curious. I mean, I don't. We don't have kids,
yeah,
so I'm not in the flow. But I would thought that I would have read that in mainstream media or something.
yeah. Not California,
That's surprising. I
not
mean,
Washington.
I say surprising because I'm basically I say this jokingly, but it's really true. Like here in Northern California, there's probably more wealth created than
Mm-hmm.
any other place on earth, other than somewhere where there's a bunch of oil wells. I mean, it's literally that, and they don't have that. Why why hasn't that passed here?
Right.
It's
It's kind of crazy. The states that have done it, I think you're gonna love this list. Arkansas, Tennessee, South Carolina. North Carolina is working on it, and it's probably going to pass in a month or so. Um, Nevada, North Dakota, and then we've got a couple other states working on it too. So there are other states that say like, oh, a high school must offer a class, but that doesn't mean anybody has to take it, right? Like I think the current stats are something like 6% of students take a computer science class across the U.S., and it's even lower for girls and underrepresented minority students. So it's
so
kind of
I
sad
mean
considering our economy runs on that.
I'm listening to your list, and this is not a political statement, but they all sound red states to me.
Currently, well, Nevada.
Nevada, I mean, I don't know whether maybe it's half and half or maybe it is a blue state, but um, I, I, I guess that's what came to my mind. I wonder,
Yeah.
is it that, or is it actually that these are generally rural states who understand that farms aren't going to get passed down, the land's going to get sold, and the kids are going to need to figure out something because, and
Yeah.
even if you do farm, quite candidly, farming's automated. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
said this earlier in the conversation. A lot of these things and are not only automated but are that's a good thing. Like the production yield per acre is actually going up
It's
because
going
it's
up.
not
Yeah.
guessing, right?
Yeah.
It's math.
Right. Exactly. So I think there's a little bit of everything there. There's recognition, probably by some of these state lawmakers, that um, they need to do more for economic development. And a lot of the economic development, even when related to agriculture, is related to um, technology creation. And the other thing that's kind of interesting that might be part of the driving factor in, I missed Nebraska, also
Oh,
similar state.
Nebraska. Oh, there's another one.
Yeah. And the thing that's kind of like that Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, that like corridor, that corner has a ton of car manufacturing facilities.
Mm.
And I know that when I was interning at Microsoft, I met a friend of mine there who previously had done like a year-long co-op with BMW in the factory. I think it's in South Carolina, but I don't
Yeah,
remember
South
exactly where
Carolina,
it is.
North Carolina, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and then Tennessee has some too. Um, but that BMW factory, he was doing some machine learning project on like optimizing like the production process or something to that effect. So he had some machine learning project. So we know that those companies are somewhat pushing for workforce development, but that's not strictly coding, right? Like realistically. But there are some coding and data science and AI related jobs there. Plus, they want their workforce to be technically literate because the cars have more computers, like chips in literally every part of the car, than almost anything else we have.
Is that
So
what you think is driving those states? I'm just curious.
that's part of it.
You're in the fight here, so is that what's really driving it? Because North Dakota and Nevada actually has a lot of manufacturing from
Yeah.
Tesla. They have the Gigafactory there.
Right.
A
Right.
lot of
Right.
companies have moved over the border from California because, quite candidly, it's
In
just
Texas.
hard to
Yeah.
do business in California.
Yeah.
Ironically, do you? I mean, what do you
There's
think?
definitely a little bit of the like companies pushing, but I've also heard stories of like individual lawmakers with that as their like agenda, right? So for example, Arkansas was like the first in the states to like have this law, and
Mm,
Arkansas's law was a major push from their previous governor Hutchinson, and his story is that he saw his roughly like 10-year-old or 11-year-old niece or something um, create an app using like MIT App Inventor for like either a flood or elections or something like that. And he was like so impressed that he was like, every kid needs to be able to do this. So that's the story in Arkansas. I believe the North Dakota story is similar, that the governor or the education secretary, one of the two, is like a big fan. I don't know the exact story, but um, and then I've heard that in Nebraska that the bill was pushed by like the Nebraska Tech Council. So
mm.
there's some, there are like various STEM and computer science coalition organizations, many of whom have members that are companies. And then of course there's code.org, which is like the nonprofit that's like kind of pushing a lot of these policies. So I think those are like the key levers.
Yeah, I think it's important. I was just thinking as you were talking, it's almost as if it's a requirement like English or social studies or any math or any of these things, art, because
Yeah.
for these kids, especially in today's world, I just don't see how you can't not have a background in this over the next 50, 60, 70 years. And actually, even if you're in a business job, you go to business school,
Mm-hmm.
you still have to understand these technology issues because technology is what's driving your company. And if you don't understand it, you're fundamentally, the problem is, or the challenge is, you don't know the right questions to ask. You don't need to know
Right.
it
Yeah.
deeply, but if you don't know the right questions to ask, you you don't know what you don't know at that point, and now you're in a world of hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually working on finishing up this cool project right now that applies computer science and data science to biology. So the idea is, and this is the premise is real, by the way. There is a virus that is attacking sugar crop, and as a result, sugar yields get like massively affected. It turns out there's like a wild variant of the sugar beet, like the plant from which sucrose is extracted, that is resistant to this virus. And so we have students using Python to go through the DNA of the wild beet, figure out which part of that DNA is responsible for the immunity to this virus, extract that piece, and then simulate using CRISPR to insert that gene into the original cultivated beet. So they're really learning, like all of the key aspects of biology while solving like a real problem and seeing how computer science isn't this like super theoretical thing of like, here's a turtle, let's move it a couple of steps up and to the right, or like, let's sort a bunch of random numbers and like, why the heck do I care about these numbers? No, let's solve an actual problem.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's really important about this is that a, a lot, and I think maybe, with age, you always look back at other generations and it's easy to say, well, they're not this or that. But I'm an X gen, and the X generation in general is a pretty resilient generation. We grew up without technology. We grew up with technology. We grew up in a we had a gas shortage in 1980s where you
Yeah.
were in line and had to be in line by your license plate. I mean, we had a major hostage situation in Iran. Iran changed. I mean,
Yeah,
a lot of
Argo.
things happened. We grew up in a generation where that baby boomer generation got divorced, and we were, I hate to use latch key kids, but basically, like, I knew how to iron, wash clothes. Um, yeah, I mean, just do things that in today's day and age kids don't know how to do. And where I taking that is that with those skills, not having those skills, you don't really get this idea that you can invent and build something. I think Legos are still important, still a popular thing, but we were
Yeah.
building Legos. We were actually, I grew up on a farm. Like, we're taking apart lawnmowers, like
Yeah.
greasing tractors, right? Changing oil. I mean, changing oil is going to be a thing of the past because of electric cars, but my brother and I, like, tinkered and played and took apart doors and did these sort of stuff that today's kids, it's, it's almost as if obviously your organization, we actually have to inject it because the
Hmm.
way they're growing up isn't intuitively giving them. They're growing up with a screen and they're playing games. Not that games can't teach you something, but most of the games aren't teaching them anything other than a
Yeah, they're not
dopamine
designed to
rush.
do that. Right.
Right, right.
And I think a lot of this is also related to the I don't remember the exact stat, but it's something to the effect of 80% of high schoolers have an iPhone, or at least 80% of high schoolers who have a phone have an iPhone, right? But the point is, like, they're using a device which obfuscates a lot of how stuff works, and generally that's good UX. But as a result, I read an article a couple months ago about how several college computer science professors are finding that students don't know what folders are. So they're just so used to putting stuff in a pile and being able to search for it that they don't realize code needs to know the structure of like where things are located. Um, but that's like kind of the related comment is that like the stuff around us is actual magic to quite a large number of current students, and for that matter, like school district administrators.
I don't. I actually made a. I had a. It wasn't. It was a belief, and I'm finding it's not true.
Hmm.
Actually, through having interns and things like that work for us, is that I equated the ability to navigate the phone based on what you just said. And, the kids I see, it's 100% of the kids, at least, that I see around town and I lift at the local gym. They all have
Yeah.
phones. Whether I mean, most of them have iPhones, but it could be an Android phone. And I equated, I think, because of the lens that I've had in my life, that they were computer, air quotes for those not watching, literate.
Mm-hmm.
The fact of the matter is that they, to your point, they can use the phone, but they don't understand how to navigate the computer. And so that phone is really an Achilles or a crutch that is inhibiting their ability to learn those things, right? And to your point, you don't segment your photos. Your photos go into the recent and you go search through your
Yeah,
photos and you
exactly.
look at photos, right? You look at Instagram. Instagram's already in a wall, or you're looking at TikTok or whatever that is. It's all walls. It's like
Mm-hmm.
old school
Walls and stuff.
message boards, right?
Yeah.
And it's you don't have to organize anything. It's organized for you. That's the whole point, so that it's easy and you get addicted to it. And and I think there's a lot of good that can happen from social networks, and I
Yeah.
built one, but so I'm not. I don't want any listener out there like, oh my God, he's like, this is all evil. It's not all evil. I ran a social network. That's how I made I sold my first company, and amazing things happened on there, right?
Yeah.
Like people got married, people's lives changed. We organized, we did all this stuff. So I'm only saying that because
Yeah.
you know how this is going to go.
And like the funny thing is like with phones, right? Like they are actually super powerful tools. So I'll tell you a story from college. Uh, Freshman year, I took a course that was like computer architecture, and so you started from like, because to me, like I knew some of the stuff, but it was all like very black boxy. Like how does a computer actually work? So you started from transistors, and then logic gates, and then assembly code, and then C code, and you like built up your understanding of how a computer works. It was a pretty fun class. It was a hard class. And somewhere in the middle of that class, my computer died. It would just constantly blue screen and it never booted. And there was an assignment due like sometime that week. So I downloaded a terminal emulator, or I guess not an emulator, it's an actual terminal on my phone. And I
Oh,
used my phone to write the code for that project. And you could write it, like you could write it, you could run the code, and like it wasn't the most user friendly thing, but like in a pinch, it was doable.
no, that's
Um,
incredible.
yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, like, and maybe I have a premise that actually your phone will be your computer. All you're going to do is you're going to hook your computer up. I have a cord going to my iPhone 14, which is recording this, and I use
Mm.
my iPhone 14 because the chips and the chips in that camera
Yeah, it's good stuff.
are well, yeah, it's better than the Sony $4,000 RX1 or two or whatever it is
Yeah.
in it. So I think that in short order, although my MacBook Studio that this whole thing is running on is like absolutely incredible and powerful, its form factor is pretty small. I think that eventually your phone will be your computer, and you'll hook a keyboard and you'll hook the thing up to it, and it'll have enough juice to do all
Yeah.
these things. But
Either that or they'll
uh,
strap goggles to us.
well, yeah, I'm not.
Yeah. But
I
anyway,
think
but yes, I
cool. Yeah, I
understand.
think it's cool, but
Yeah.
I haven't gotten there yet on that. But I think that these kids need to be taught this, and I think what you're doing is injecting that, not discipline but framework, to say, hey, it's not just about your thumb scrolling on the phone. It's, hey,
Hmm.
you could actually make one of these things and build it and invent it and introduce that idea, because I think a lot of that idea in America was lost, and it, post World War II, when we sort of had, or in the Industrial Revolution during the early 1900s, mid 1900s, that time was, and the wars actually produced enormous innovation and output
Hmm.
at those times.
Yeah, totally.
We just haven't had that all-encompassing event to drive that, and I think that's made people a little bit soft. And before you know it, somebody's going to catch up. And I read your story and I was reading your website and everything, and it feels like you're saying, hey, look, we need to get back to the basics, because the truth is that places like China are training their kids with rigor.
Hmm.
The fact that they don't even use TikTok, and I know that's it's been said, and it's worth saying over, but it's worth saying over and over again, because that's not a joke, right? These kids are being trained
Yeah, I think
and
your key word is
educated.
rigor. Fundamentally, so like what I have found, there's a great book by Dana Goldstein, who talks, like the book is called The Teacher Wars, but basically like tries to analyze like what actually like results in like strong learning outcomes for students. And there are lots of things, but like a key feature is having high expectations for what students can do. And that's a huge part of what we do, right? It's almost like, there could be like a dozen burger joints across a city, um, and of varying quality. Some of them are not going to be super great and so on, or like they're maybe late on their service, and like, dispute other things about McDonald's. Like I don't go to McDonald's, but one thing that McDonald's does hold is a strong, high expectation of service time and consistency, right? And in schools, we don't really have something like that. Or maybe a better example that people might actually like is like Chipotle. Like almost every Chipotle you go to is like of a certain standard. And that's because they have a system in place and they have high expectations in place. And that's part of what we're trying to provide here as well, right?
Well, I think that is really important. It touches a nerve for me because I think that we've created, and I'm generalizing and I'm acknowledging that just because you read it in the news and mainstream media doesn't mean that it's actually the majority. That's
Mm-hmm.
very clear that it can be a minority of people who are very loud. I think it's called the insignificant, something minority, the intransigent minority, basically, where a very
Sure.
small pop, right?
Intransigent. Yeah.
Yeah, what's it called?
I think it's intransigent, but
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
yeah, it's in
Whatever. Yeah.
whatever it is. Basically, the idea is that a
The
very
people who are
small,
upset are talker are
yeah,
louder. Yeah.
are the loudest people, and it doesn't represent the majority. The majority are too busy doing like living life, and then they don't do something to not fight back, but to provide a different perspective, and then that minority position actually becomes the mainstream. And now, before you
Yeah.
know it, we're in a place where we don't know it. And I think what's happened, like I am very much against, and I probably get hell for this, but like I don't think there should be any participation trophies. Like rigor or an excellence is just part of how the world has worked. The strongest dinosaurs lived, right? Like, and I know that's sort of basic, but
So
we can't be a.
I think the slight tweak there is sufficiently strong enough above a certain threshold, and we need to move the threshold up, right?
I like your political correctness.
Well, it's not
And
even about that. It's like better. It's the right sort of mental framing
you're
of like
right.
what the model actually is. You don't need to be absolute best per se, but you need to be sufficiently good enough. And that's sufficiently good enough. Like some people think it's here, but it's really like way over here.
Well, I think the other thing you said is that around rigor is that we don't we educate towards the middle, and the people who
Sure.
are a little bit better or even great, they get pulled down, and we need to reintroduce these ideas in a positive way, not in a negative way, because those people actually will pull the people who may not,
Yeah.
maybe one standard deviation below the mean up,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And
And
I
I
think
think there's an aspect to what we do that like flips the perspective a little bit too. Of if you think about like why do kids perform poorly in school? Like obviously there are factors like at home life and all of those things. But one big factor is they're just simply not engaged. They simply don't care about what they're learning because it doesn't seem relevant or it doesn't seem interesting. And so, like, there was a student we were working with at one of our partner schools in Kansas City. So they were doing a summer project where they used Tableau to visualize a data set that they cared about and essentially publish an interactive blog article. And I didn't really know why these kids were in summer school per se. Like, I mean, they had like some catch up or extra activity or whatever. And he was like clearly one of the best kids in the group because he was like, he downloaded the Chicago crime data set that we'd cleaned for him. He wrote some custom formulas to sort and group various things. And he had even like found another data set of another city and tried to put it on the same map for comparison. And I was like, okay, this kid like must be pretty smart. And then I like interviewed him and he said something to the effect of, I failed 2 classes last year. And I was like, wait, what? And he said, yeah, I failed algebra and English because I just couldn't force myself to be interested. But this Tableau project is super fun. And I'm still doing like the same math and writing an essay, but it feels interesting and it feels empowering, right? So I think there's a sort of thing to think about there that the people who might be sort of traditionally poor students might actually be poor students because they don't care. And if you can make them care and give them something that's really stimulating, you might actually flip sort of your understanding of like who's sort of best in the course. Um, and I think that's like part of a like key piece of our philosophy is make the content and experience empowering and engaging and rigorous, and teams of students will rise up to the occasion.
So how does it work? Because you've referred to our philosophies and how it works. Can you explain for
Yeah.
listeners how you implement this within schools? Because I can
Yeah.
imagine there's probably some parents listening to this to say, well, I need to get this guy to my school ASAP with this Invent XYZ program so that my kids can be exposed to this.
Yeah. So let me walk you through a couple of examples. But basically, a school district says, hey, we want to do your program. And they can do, so basically, we have a library of hands-on projects that take about 30 hours for students. And each of our projects takes some interesting real-world situation and marries it with like computer science, career in technology, like high-tech education skills and or STEM skills, and then also with core course standards, so like English or math or history or science. And so that way it gives school districts the maximum flexibility of where to place this project. Because at the end of the day, our goal is that every single student should experience like minimum 5 of our projects, but like ideally a portfolio of 20 to 30 from middle school to high school, so that they can show their work to employers and colleges and scholarships, and get internships and so on, or start their own companies. And so basically what happens is the school district says, okay, we want to do your program. We work with the school to identify which teachers would be interested in facilitating this thing and do a decent job. And then we choose a date in the school year, so like October or November or February, whatever it is, to do a specific project. And so some of these projects are things like build and code electronic music instruments in algebra. So you actually get to see why sine waves and imaginary numbers have anything to do with anything, because they're actually really important in electronics and music. Or it might be the one that I was talking about earlier, have students recreate a historical empire as a video game. And we're working on quite a few more in like AI with computer vision, on like using a CNC router, which is like an automated cutting machine, so that students can make sets, sort of like the thing we built here. This was built on a CNC router. And then like make professional looking, short films, interpreting poems that they're reading, or like Hamlet or whatever. And so basically that's like the kind of the theme of the project. Students get 30 hours to do the challenge, and basically they walk through our instructions, and our instructions are like a combination of text, bite-sized tutorial videos that are like masterclass quality, but like TikTok length. So it's very easy to find the tutorial that you need for the specific part you're on. And then little mini exercises such as coding challenges or like the actual thing that they're doing, right? And then a couple times a week, we virtually have our mentor staff beam into the school so that it's not all dependent on that one teacher, right? We don't expect any public school or private school teacher to be some kind of, or charter school teacher to be some kind of AI expert or virtual film production expert. Like that's just, if they were an expert in that, they would be making 150K or something minimum elsewhere in industry, right? So we expect the teacher to be a facilitator and help guide students through our platform to do a project, but we don't expect them to be content experts in the technology. So that way, like we have like the virtual office hours a couple times a week. Students can ask us questions. And then as students ask certain questions, we record more tutorial videos, put them in our FAQ. So it becomes more and more scalable, and make it really cool.
Well, that's awesome. Do the school districts pay you?
Yeah. I mean, it's a business.
No, I know. I just, yeah, like it's okay. Like I don't think we should apologize for that. If you want to
Yeah.
have something like this at this level of excellence to create courses and provide
Right. Especially this.
people that you have on staff, like
Mm-hmm.
cost money. So they would pay you a fee per student, the district, or how does that work?
Yeah. So I care about equity. I care that every student gets this experience. So typically we don't charge per student. Although I will say that school districts seem to be like a little bit more used to that kind of model. So typically what we say is, especially in the states that have the mandate, we say, okay, look, to meet this mandate, normally you would have to hire enough computer science teachers to teach all of, let's say, your ninth graders a dedicated computer science class. Typical high school has like 400 kids per grade. And a teacher can teach like maybe 100 kids, right, in like periods of 25 or something. Um, so we're talking like at least 3 or 4 teachers. First of all, there's already a massive teacher shortage. Like uh, one of the districts told me, like, frankly, we're looking for people with a pulse, right? Like it's that bad in a lot of the country. Um, so if it's already bad to hire regular teachers, where are we getting computer science teachers? And like some schools are saying, let me take my existing staff and like have them do this 3-week training course offered by the state to get a certificate. Yeah, I see your face. That's like, is that really going to be life changing and high quality? Probably not.
And if it
On
worked, they probably would take that certificate and go get a job at Facebook. I'm just
Yeah,
saying, like, I'm not,
right.
I mean, just sort of off cheeky here saying that probably is the way it worked. You're not going to do that. If it was that easy, more people would take a 3 week course and get a
Why wouldn't we just
certificate.
teach students that way, right?
Right,
Like,
right. Why don't we send them to the certificate
yeah,
phase?
exactly. And also, like what you just said, like does happen. I think so. Like for example, I've heard this from a couple of districts in Florida and in Texas, where it's not really a 3-week course. It's more like you have to pass something that's a lot closer to like AP Computer Science, where you learn like Java and like a decent number of algorithms and things. Um, and a lot of those teachers are actually like leaving after they've done the training and getting jobs that pay at least another 30K more.
Yeah, and
So
why and good on them,
yeah,
right? Like I mean, we all the mortgage doesn't get paid with nice like what was that movie? It was like Smiles. Like can't pay your mortgage in Smiles, so you're gonna make more money.
I don't know that reference, but the
Oh well,
statement.
that was the couples retreat.
Oh,
Anyway,
okay. Oh,
it was
remind me.
couples retreat with Vince Vaughn.
Yeah. That
That
makes
could date me, but anyway, he basically has a scene and the guy says something. He's like, "Oh well, we pay in Smiles," and then it comes to this other
sense.
scene where the guy actually needs money, and he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I'll just pay you in Smiles." Well, I mean, it's not currency, right? So,
Right.
and it's
Right.
not anything on the teachers. Like teachers are very dedicated people, but they're
It's a
humans
hard job,
too.
man.
It's a, I don't even I think it's an incredibly hard job. I don't even know how they do it, to be
Yeah.
quite candid. And they're not paid enough, and that's just a fact. And the
Right.
fact that they get training and they're going to do it. So anyway, not to get off track because you and I probably get off on track that, but they go to these certifications, they might leave, or they do a 3 week course that actually doesn't accomplish. It's sort of like just a nice thing to do, but it
Super
doesn't really
basic. Yeah.
accomplish the goal.
Right. So they can technically teach a computer science class with that certification, but then you still have to replace, like if you took a math teacher and turned them into a computer science teacher and they were teaching 5 periods of math before, they have to teach 5 periods of computer science. So now you still got to go find a math teacher. So it doesn't really solve the problem to reallocate people in that way without doing something a little bit smarter. And so what we say is, look, let's take this computer science course, break it up into 5 30-hour projects or 10 projects, and distribute it in courses that kids already take. So we'll do a unit of computer science where students are solving that sugar beet virus infection thing in biology class. So they're learning about genetics and they're learning about like natural selection and all that stuff through this like coding experience. Um, or in like math class, you're building and coding that electronic music instrument and so on, right? So the idea is you break it up, and now suddenly you don't need extra staff because you already have staff teaching a class, and you just need to find a unit, or rather, we need to find a unit, Invent XYZ does, that fits in a class that already exists, and then enhance that unit, make it way more exciting, cutting edge, and give students sort of a double experience of computer science and STEM plus the core content.
And
So
I also,
that's what we're doing. We're saying you could hire 5 teachers or pay us the equivalent of one, and we'll split it up.
well, I think it's a good approach and integrate it into an existing course and augment it with our with your experts who drop in.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
another thing I was thinking that I can only imagine your sales cycle, which we don't need to get into today on this on this show, but I have some experience with
Hmm.
union teachers, and I could easily see how something like this gets brought in, and now they're like, "Oh, you're trying to replace us," and that's not your approach. Is really excellent because you're saying, "I'm not trying to replace anybody. I'm trying to augment the the existing class that you're already teaching to allow it to integrate some things that may be beneficial." And
Yeah,
by the way, no extra work on you. There's some extra things that you need to do, but we're not asking you to do them all. We're going to augment that
right.
portion with some experts that can come in and do an hour Q&A or however you hold that.
Yeah, exactly. And the funny thing is, like, one of the first schools that we worked with in like outside of Philly, it was like the second school that we piloted it with, basically. um, I had a meeting with the school, and they like basically had a meeting with the department heads of the school so that like we could see which teachers might be interested. And then one of the department heads said, "Hey, so you're like in a meeting right now with all the union leaders. Did you know that, right?" And I was like, "I don't know that." And he's like, "We really like what you're doing, and we want to make sure that you get paid." So they like saw me as like one of them, which is super cool. And the to your point, like we're trying to make this so easy that it's actually less stressful to do an Invent XYZ project for a couple of weeks or 3, 4 weeks than it is to lecture and grade and spend, till 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. grading papers and then giving students feedback, because that project that we designed has that sort of immediate feedback piece built in. And some of it is auto graded, or some of it's like, you run your code, it didn't work. Clearly, you didn't understand the concept. Let's try again. And so we want to make it so seamless, um, that like teachers would rather do this than the old way. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, you have to see it first to believe it, but that's the goal.
no, I think it's a great goal. And I think that it takes pressures. I mean, I don't want to speak for teachers. It feels like it takes a lot of pressure off because they don't have to go learn this module that they're now required to teach. They have to know enough about it, but they've got help. And I think that's the key is sort of your force multiplier
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
that.
Right. Exactly. So like we want to help teachers multiply their efficacy. Um, and so, like, one of our teachers who facilitated the project in rural Tennessee, where students coded a wildfire simulator. Audra kind of basically made this point that, like, she used to be a librarian. Like, coding is like not anywhere in her purview in terms of like what she knows how to do. It makes her uncomfortable. But doing this project was so easy for her that like all she really had to do was ensure that students were logging in on time, able to get to the resources. If they were stuck and it was something like kind of quick, she could just be like, "Hey, like, did you quickly reread the instructions or check the like I need help section?" And if you're still stuck, like, let's hop on a breakout room with one of our virtual staff, right? Like, it's really not like, it's not meant to be hard. We're trying to make it so easy that this teacher's role is to maintain that kind of personal connection and emotional relationship with students, be their best cheerleader. And like when the project eventually gets tough, because our projects do get tough, right? We're asking students to build real things, help them see it through, help them say, like, you can do it, and sit with them for a couple minutes and empower them, cheerlead them, and move on, right? Like,
Yeah, I think this is super important. I think it's a great service. You've been doing this. You got the Presidential Innovation Award in 2020. How you didn't
yeah.
start too much uh, previous to that? It was only a year or two since you had
No,
started.
so I started in 2020, right as I was finishing college at Penn,
Okay.
and so now we're at like, I guess, almost year 3. So
Yeah, well, it seems like you're spreading and doing well, right? You got, and you are you technically a nonprofit or are you a for profit?
no, we are technically hybrid, but the main organization is a for-profit.
Okay, so you're a
Um,
triple bottom line or B Corp or something like that.
yeah, triple bottom line, and then we also have a separate nonprofit, but the idea is to like leverage all types of capitals so that we can get into more schools. So like in some regions, there's like local philanthropic organizations that really care about STEM or real world learning or educational equity. Like we don't want to preclude them from bringing this to more schools because we're an entity of a certain type. So the idea is we like I mentioned in my college essays, right? Like an inventor space in every school across America is like very much still the general vision.
Oh, I love that. And uh, I actually love that you are a for-profit business. I think it puts the pressure on your organization to be great and stay
Mm-hmm.
great as you scale. And I think too often, more often than not, and I've got 2 decades of experience in nonprofits, so I think I get to say this, supporting them and giving money to them is that the bigger they get, they can get bureaucratic and they start to become a job creation entity versus a true innovation. Whether that's innovating, whether you're environmental, whatever it is, it just generally happens. And the fact, and I use this example, there's a company which I was involved in, and I love what Sean Smeaton has done up there at Taharka Brothers in Baltimore, or down from you in Philly. But is they took a nonprofit, which was take in inner city kids, educate them how to build a business. And it was an ice cream company.
Mm.
And they turned it into a for profit ice cream company. It's called Taharka Brothers. They're all over Baltimore now.
Oh,
And the idea is that Sean's got to, and they have another CEO who's the CFO now and founder, but they've got to innovate and sell ice cream in order to make sure that they can fulfill their mission, which keeps everybody sort of on not edge, but pushing to make
yeah.
sure that they can actually make money and make this vision. And then the people feel better because, it's almost like, hey, buy the ice cream. We're supporting this effort. And by the way, if you don't buy it, we can't do it. Versus, okay,
Mm,
well, we're going to go raise the money from nonprofits, and then it's just like this whole nother thing. So I actually love that, and I think
right.
it's. I mean, maybe you've seen this already in 3 years, but it's probably going to make you better by the mere fact that you do have to charge and you do have to make money, or it doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's a interesting and good way of putting it, right? Like we charge because otherwise you don't get it.
Well, that
It doesn't
I just
happen. Yeah.
think that yeah, I fundamentally, and I know I fundamentally believe in general that 90%, give or take, of nonprofits should not be nonprofits. I think they should be for-profit companies that have to prove that the solution, because everybody's selling a solution
Right.
that
Yeah.
that I'm leaving sliver, whether that's 10%, 15, or maybe 20, that some things just inherently aren't going to be able to do that. But I think if you do think with some ingenuity, you could figure out how you would have to do that to make it go. And I think that that's what makes the organization become better. Otherwise, it just gets stagnant. So
Yeah.
everything I read about you and what you've done there with the program and what you are doing, I find it interesting that even when I said to you, and people who aren't watching won't see this, but if you are watching, you can rewind and notice this, that when I asked you, Nikil, if are you charging? And your whole body language changed. It's almost like we as humans, when we do something good for people, feel like we have to apologize to charge. I mean, isn't that an interesting human?
Yeah. There's a good, I forget, I don't remember where I saw this. Maybe I've seen this in multiple places, but with like sales, right? Like some people think, oh, I'm bothering. Like it's hard to like cold call or whatever because I'm like bothering them. But to be a good salesperson for your product, you have to truly believe that you are helping people with your solution. And if you are truly helping people, you're not bothering them by calling them. You're making them aware of a solution to a problem that that person probably has or might have, but you have to call them to know, right? Like, so I think you're right that there's an important frame shift that's like not always super easy to do. That like you're not bothering people, you're not like charging people like accidentally or like apologetically. It's I'm providing you a service that's valuable. I'm solving something that you care about, and therefore, um, it, tell me what it's worth, right? Like,
Yeah, it's pretty simple. And if you do feel that way, that you are bothering them, then you probably think really deeply about what you are selling, because
mhm.
obviously you're uncomfortable about it. I just find it interesting from a psychology standpoint how these frameworks in society make us feel this way, because it's
Yeah,
like you're doing something good. Yeah, yes, you can do something good and charge for it, and you can get rich at it. And that's okay. Like,
yeah.
there's nothing wrong with making money. In fact, the very
In
thing
fact,
that
that's what we
you,
want.
yeah,
We
right,
want people to
right.
do things that are good for society and make money doing it.
Yeah, like there's nothing like you are inherently teaching people to invent things to help people
Yeah.
save time and money, make their life better, and make money doing it. Like, you make money doing it, you employ people, people are happy, they get jobs, they get families they support, and like,
Hmm.
so I just think that's a really positive thing and a good thing. And I don't think we should apologize at all about it. And I am excited to see an inventor's room. Do you envision is it a lab really? Like
Yeah,
invention
so
lab?
they can do the projects without having a physical space. However, like actually, we moved to Kansas City
Oh,
um,
you're in Kansas City. That's
in
right. My
21.
dad lives there, and you
Right.
and I
Yeah.
talked about that. Totally forgot. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, because Travis Kelsey of the Kansas City Chiefs sponsored a STEM lab for underserved high school kids here. So I tweeted at him. I sent the Innovation Prize article, and then the school organization called me and said, "Hey, like let's work together." So we ended up like I ended up helping design the lab, and then my team were basically the teachers for the STEM uh, like key pieces for a year or so. We developed a lot of the content while working with the students, and like really developed empathy for teachers during that process. Um, and then now, like they're kind of running the space. We got our own office, and we're trying to scale it out, right? So um, what was I going to say related to that? Oh yeah, so the whole idea was like, why are we talking about labs? So the inventor space is sort of like the next step of like, you can do all these projects, but if you really want to have your school stand out, especially with all these charters and vouchers and things coming along, right? Like, you really ought to have an innovation lab that's not just for show, but it's actually where students want to be, and it enables them to do all the real cool things and build real products. So that's sort of the like, it's sort of like a reverse Peloton, where like in Peloton you have to buy the bike, and that bike enables the subscription. But this is like sort of the opposite way of like, you buy the subscription of the content and services that enables you to do a certain tier of projects. And then if you want to take it to the next level as a school, maybe integrate more like physical set building with a theater, or virtual film production, or motion capture animation, or like laser cutters and 3D printers and electronics tools. Well, we've got like a standardized inventor space model that we've been working on, that tries to make that as easy as possible. Um, and because, and the reason why this is also flipped is because of a mistake I see constantly in schools. They'll buy all this stuff and build this fancy lab and not think about how people are going to actually use it. Physical stuff should come guided by the things that people are going to actually do in the space. So that's why curriculum comes first, space comes second.
Yeah, I'm writing down inventor space. I think that I can't, or inventors lab. I can't,
Yeah,
like
inventor
if we
space.
had an
Yeah,
inventors lab in every school in America, it would just open up a world of possibility for even kids just to even walk in there and discover, like maybe they're not even enrolled in that program, but eventually, things catch on. One kid will go in there, they'll invent something, do something, start a business. All of a sudden they're making extra money. And before you know it, the kids are all going to want to do that. And if it wasn't cool, it'll become cool.
yeah,
And
yeah, exactly. Like, so I'll tell you a couple of quick stories related to what you just said, right? So when we started working with the kids here in Kansas City, end of 21, um, the kids came in and we asked them, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? And the vast majority, like more than 50% of them said some version of hairstylist, guys and girls. And if you think about it, like, why are they saying that? It's largely because that's what they've been exposed to. That's what their like aunts and uncles or cousins or parents or whatever it is do. That's what their circle looks like. And then I was describing and like demoing this like little smart football that I had made, which has like a sensor on the inside. It's like a Bluetooth beacon, and based on the signal strength, you can tell where the ball is on the field. I was describing this thing, and then one of the kids was like, "Oh, wait a second, that's like a Ring doorbell, right?" In terms of the like wireless functionality. And I was like, "Hold up, you know what a Ring doorbell is?" And it's never crossed your mind that you could be one of the people designing that product or similar product and making 150K plus a year. Like, it took a while from that like moment to like maybe like almost a year later to see that shift in what kids thought they were capable of. And then we saw something really similar happen again in the rural school district in Tennessee, where they coded that wildfire simulator and did their presentation on May 11th, right? Where these kids started out like not really sure about STEM. This like whole computer science thing sounds hard. And then they came out of the project with an awesome presentation that we have the recording of on YouTube. And they like talked about how like that mentorship piece and the rigor of the project helped them realize, wait, I want to be an engineer, and this is like so much different than like high school English class, which is like always the same, but this is challenging and more fun. And we like gave everybody this like special shirt that says it's like it's got like a wildfire like indicator. I have the shirts, but they're in the box, so I can't really pull it out. Here, wait. Actually, let me try. Oh, okay. Hey, nice.
Oh, cool.
Danger of inspiring future coders, and it's got like a little wildfire symbol,
That's
like
awesome.
and then on the back, this is like a picture of the simulator that they made.
Wow. The only thing I was thinking, Nikil, is that their presentation was probably better than whatever the state bid out to somebody that took 6 months and whatever 20 times as much money.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I mean, as a first project, like it increases students' self-efficacy so much, right? And then we like showcase that this is a real thing. Like, here's this X prize that's like an $11 million prize on solving wildfires. Here's this 2 minute papers video of a group in I think Switzerland that created a really similar wildfire simulator. Like, these are real challenges. Like, um, and the idea is that that was the first project, but come back in 2 years after those kids have done 7 or 8, and I think they're going to be pretty damn impressive. Like, another thing we didn't really talk about much so far is even in college, when you go to a college computer science course and get a computer science degree, the vast majority of kids who graduate from these courses don't know how to make a real app. They don't know how to make a website. They don't know how to deploy anything. It's theory. And it's not that theory is not valuable. It's that you don't need a lot of that theory to make something that is valuable to real people. And so part of what we're doing is flipping the model as well of like, let's get you making real stuff, go top down rather than starting from the absolute bottom level of the algorithms. Let's use the libraries that people have already made. And then as you get more and more interested, then let's add more theory and more optimization and all that stuff.
Well, I
And
think
let's make sure you can make stuff real that's
I,
real.
I agree. And having gone through the educational system in 2 master's degrees, the I think that what you said is really important. I believe that undergraduate schools and master's degrees and obviously PhDs goes without saying, but they teach frameworks and critical thinking frameworks. And they do a decent job, at least when I was in school. And those frameworks are what you use if you're paying attention in school that you can apply to anything. But where they lack is exactly what you just said, which is this practical, let's actually take these and let me show you how what happens when the rubber meets the road, because what happens is you graduate from school. I guess the best example I could give isn't necessarily always technology, but it could be, in my life, it was go to college. You might go work for an investment bank or a VC or
Yeah,
somebody
I
like
mean that was
that.
still true at the
And
time. Yeah,
actually, the funny part is you graduate, and this is true even coming at UPenn, where
mm-hmm.
arguably has the best undergraduate business degree, maybe equivalent to an MBA in many ways, and it's been touted as
Honestly,
that.
it's probably more rigorous in some
No,
ways.
it is, and I know
Yeah,
because I had an intern who worked for me at a
yeah,
VC firm, and the guy was like, clearly, he's like, "Oh, all the MBA kids are in my classes." And I was like, "What?" Anyway, the point is that in general, you graduate in that program, and they actually send you to an 8-week course on how to build spreadsheets. Now, I ask you, like, why did you just get a 4-year degree? Like, shouldn't you have known how to do that? And the reason is because it's a lot of it's a lot of theory, it's a lot of these things. And the
yeah,
same thing happens with computer scientists, of which I've hired for my software companies, which is, I don't want to name the schools, but we're taking kids out of like top schools, bringing them in here with CS degrees, and the implementation phase of like, hey, you're going to be, do you know how to use Jira? Like
yeah,
you're going to need to be in a sprint, and that sprint is 2 weeks. Do you know how to write the story? Do you know how to write the epic? Do you know what we're doing in our daily stand up? And are you like where the rubber meets the road? And I think those things that you're bringing is this, I think if you show some light, like, hey, actually, you don't have to just spend all your time. You can be interested. And I think that's a real key thing. What you're doing is making these kids interested in here's how it actually works. Cause I was, you were speaking earlier. I was one of those kids. I can remember telling my 6th grade teacher when she was teaching me math, and I was good at math, but I wasn't
yeah,
and I ultimately applied myself, but I was like, my dad has a business. He gets an accountant. Like, so it wasn't that I didn't understand it, and it wasn't that I wasn't delegating. Now, clearly, I learned how to delegate in 6th grade. It was the teacher's job, which is hard, especially when you have a whole classroom. How do you figure out how to get the kids engaged? And your program comes in, and it feels like does that. And that combination is the real explosion of kids becoming interested, all the way back to your story. So I'm super, as
yeah,
you could tell, I've no, and for listeners, I got no interest in this. Like, I heard about this thing. I was like, this is exciting. And this is what we need, because we're, we as a country really need something to reinvigorate this idea that STEM is important, because if not, we're going to get outsourced. Like,
yeah,
and we're going to be in trouble, which means our economy is going to be in trouble, and America in general. And this isn't a political statement. Like, I don't even know what it means anymore. Like, if you went down the chart, I'd probably fall left and right on different things, for sure. Not probably, for sure. This is like, I just love this country, and this country has, whether you're mad about something or not, there's no other place on earth that provides this level of opportunity where you really can be like have nothing and become super rich. Not that that is all success, but it's the gauge of which we use to say, here's what you could become.
mm-hmm.
And there's just no other place on earth that can do that. And if we don't get back to these basics and do what we used to do, and maybe as importantly, just make people have a better life, man, and realize what their potential could be.
Yeah, exactly. Like the if you think about the classic American image, right? Like when people think of Americans, they think of like creative, hardworking entrepreneurs that build things that the rest of the world uses, right? Like that's generally the image of Americans. I mean, there's also the like boisterous, like sort of like uh, speak loud and carry a big stick kind of like mentality too. But like that like ethos of you can build almost anything and it's a land of opportunity and it's kind of a melting pot is like the thing that America has been for a long time, for like more or less since inception, right? And we have to make sure that for America to compete globally in this world, all of our students need to come out with the maximum amount of skill and confidence and interest and curiosity and be able to build real things that will help us like maintain and like way increase our lead in the future across the world, right? um, I think that's like a huge part of what we're doing is like, I mean, that sort of vaguely looks like, American flag, like blue, red stuff with like dots that look kind of like stars. Like that is intentional. um, but I mean, that's the point. Like, let's go into that patriotism, make sure it's really a land of opportunity for everybody, and let's get everybody access to the information and mentorship that is required for every student to be able to build and create real things that are useful to people.
You can just drop the mic. Show's over. I mean, I think that's a great segue here into the end. I'm really grateful for you coming on. And I was trying to get creative, and I know I sent you a video before, but if you were to give parents three pieces of advice on not trying to program their kids, but on the ability to unlock their potential.
Yeah.
And you're in this, and this is what you do every day, and you are intimately integrated in literally into the classroom, which is a is a really it's a privilege. It's an opportunity that not a lot of people get. What would you say to them
Yeah.
besides
So
sign up for your program and get it into the schools?
yeah. I mean, I will say that too. Like, if you are actually interested after hearing this thing in getting this in your student's school, you can email me at nikil@inventxyz.com. I'm sure you'll put the link in the show notes. And I'll give you a little forwardable that you can send to your school district's superintendent or your school's principal or your headmaster or like whatever the relevant word is at your school. And ideally, we get like 50 parents in one region who are all like, hell yeah, I want this thing. Why are we not offering this thing? And then now it's like the parents really care about this thing. And now the school district has no choice but to act. The other things, though, is like, how do you actually like raise kids that are curious and things like that? I think I have a friend who's an assistant manager of a movie theater that's like 4 blocks from me. And I don't remember exactly how we became friends, but like I like came up to the theater, asked about some show times, and we started talking about film production and like and all of that. And yesterday I was hanging out with him. He said, "Oh, I have to like finish counting some stuff. Do you want to just like come down with me to the basement?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, sure." And I saw their like storeroom, and you know how they have the like drink dispensers
Yep.
for like sodas. It turns out the sodas actually come in this cardboard box, and there's like a plastic bag inside that cardboard box. It's called a bib, which I think stands for bottle in a bag, but I don't know. Um, and these things are like in the basement. There's a silicone tube that like connects to the bottle, and then it goes into some kind of pump. And I think there's like a carbonation thing going on as well. And so when somebody upstairs like is giving you the Coke or like whatever soft drink you're asking for, is actually coming through this like syrup bag up in and like being pumped out in a really weird way. I had no idea that this is how the thing worked. But the only way I would know is if I was curious enough to ask, or I like went to a business to like observe how it works. And there's so many stories of like the best business ideas and the best inventions and things like that coming because you observed someone do something you didn't expect them to do. A friend of mine from Penn also started a company, and I think the story is something like his uncle's friend runs a like lab supply company that does like Kim wipes and like beakers and stuff like that. And somehow my friend had like started talking to him and saw that he was managing the pricing and the inventory with a manual Excel file. And this is like 100,000 item like list. And my friend was like, "This is absurd. What are we doing?" And came up with the idea to use some sort of machine learning model to automate some of the pricing and like, you know, track for supply and demand and all of that, right? So you don't need to manually do this like really ridiculous job. But the only way he would have known is if he was curious and constantly asking people to tell me what you do and give me details or show me, right? And I think it's really important that kids and adults constantly have that curiosity and like go up to random places that you think are cool and say, hey, I'm interested in learning about this industry, or LinkedIn message somebody who does something cool, or Twitter message somebody who think is doing something cool. I'm interested in learning about this. Like, can we hop on a call? Can I shadow you? Like, can you just show me like what you do? And like a lot of people actually respond just to like out of the surprise that somebody's genuinely interested in what they're doing. It's an amazing way to learn. And like another sort of related example is I really like photography and videography. Like, I mean, hopefully that's clear. But there was this problem that Tesla's had 3-4 years ago. I don't remember exactly when it was like really major, but there was a string of Tesla accidents in a row within like a few months, also in China and the US, where Teslas were smacking into at full speed white 18-wheelers. And you think about, why the heck is that happening? They've got all these machine learning models. Like, what's wrong with, like, what's specifically about this 18-wheeler? And, you know, honestly, the only way you might realize what's going on is if you actually know about cameras and realize that they're using what are essentially like slightly better than phone cameras as their cameras all around the car. And if you know about cameras that they have a certain dynamic range, basically there's like a darkest thing that they can see, and from there there's like only a certain ratio of like brightness before everything turns white. And for phones, that ratio is only like 500 times brighter ish, maybe 1,000 times actually. That's probably more accurate. But the problem is your road is black or gray, and the sky is super, super bright. In fact, it might be something like 10,000 times brighter. So no wonder that a white truck was blending into the sky, which looks white to the camera, and cars weren't seeing it, right? So like a solution to that problem might only avail itself if you have a wide array of knowledge and things that you care about and understand and can make those connections across, right? So it's really, really important to like have your kids go out and learn about a variety of topics, memorize some facts. And a lot of people are like, wait, memorizing, I can Google. No, you want to memorize. That's how you can start making connections. You can't make connections if you have empty nodes. And then really be curious. Like have that practice like ingrained.
I think that's great advice. Where's the best place, and we'll put it in the show notes, for listeners to find you and Invent XYZ?
Yeah, so our website is inventxyz.com. And then also you can email me at Nikil, so N as in Nancy, I, K as in kite, I, L as in love, at inventxyz.com. And so, yeah, if you're interested in doing this kind of thing at your school, email me. I'll give you a template to like email your school district leaders. If you're interested in doing or having your kid do one of our projects over the summer, we are taking 15 students to do an Invent summer program where they will be helping us fine tune some of our projects. And they'll also get to do some really cutting edge stuff like using Unreal Engine, which is the engine that Fortnite is built in. Or they'll be doing like the biology project. So they'll get a really awesome experience learning and building really cool things. And then they'll help us like kind of iron out the explanations, make them really clean. And then we're also currently looking at raising a small round. So if anybody's interested in like investing in this or something like that, like, you know, you can email me about that too.
Well, cool. I will make sure that everything gets in the show notes. I love what you're doing. I think this could be a great thing for kids, America, and everybody involved. So thanks for coming on the show and sharing this. And it was great to meet you on Twitter. It's finally great to see your face
Yeah.
and not a Twitter icon. We'll stay in touch, and best of luck with everything you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Bye, everyone.